So in this video, we're going to accomplish two things. We're going to implement the order list by user, and then we're also going to implement a second method, which will be able to give us order items by order. We may just call it order items, and then we'll pass in the order ID. And this will return another view. All right, so let's kind of jump back up here into order list by user, and let's do the work that we need to get our orders. I'm going to go ahead and not initialize this collection because we'll go ahead and do that as part of our pulling it from the database. So it's really a straightforward thing. We'll grab our context, and then from our context we'll just grab all orders where the row has an order or has a user ID, where that user ID equals this user ID. And then we'll just say to list, and we'll store this in user orders. And then we'll go ahead and return those orders, and that will take care of it. Now, depending on the mechanics that we need to do, we may need to convert to a view model and set up a view model for that. So to set up that view model, we'll just jump into our models folder, view models. We're currently under manage orders, so let's go ahead and create a new folder for that. And then we'll add a new class, and we'll call this the order list by user view model. And this view model will just have some basic properties. It's basically going to have all the properties off of the orders table at this point. So an order has the following fields, so we'll have the following properties. Actually, so let's see here. We're going to need the ID of the order. So that'll be an int. We're going to need the int of the user ID. Last name. And if we need to add additional information, we'll go ahead and do that here as well. So let's go ahead and save that. And we'll go ahead and do that conversion. So we'll actually end up needing a list of order lists by user view model. Capitalize my B. And import. And this will be user orders VMs equals users orders select. I'll drop this down to a new line. And what we'll select is new order list by user view model, and I want to just pass in X, which is the original user order. So I'll actually change X to be user O or user ODR. And then we'll have to add a constructor to our view model. And in this constructor, we're just going to copy values. So we'll need the order. Actually, let's go ahead and create the constructor. There we go. That'll be easier. We'll still need that regular constructor since it is a view model. And then here we'll say ID equals user ODR dot ID. User ID is user ODR dot user ID. Date created equals user ODR date created. Order status. And then this is where things get a little interesting because we have things like username, and that's going to come from user ODR.user.username. So we're taking that secondary jump through from the orders table into the users table and grabbing that username from there. First name is user ODR, so that's our order. User property maps to the users table, and then we'll grab first name, and then last name, same idea. We may want to also do email address. as I'm kind of thinking through it. So user email address would be nice. Now that email address property does not exist, so I'm just going to go ahead and click here and say create property, and Visual Studio will create that property for me. It knows it's a string because this property is a string, so it creates that new property based on the same syntax and data type. So if we do a quick build just to check things, we have one implicit conversion error. That's easy enough to fix because we need to do our select and then call to list. And once we do that, that should take care of it. Alright, and then we're going to take the view model collection and return that instead. So let's now right click, actually there we go. I'm going to copy this type because I'll need it when I do the add view dialog. So we're going to go ahead and use the list template. The model class that we're using is the type that I just copied, which is the order list by user view model. And everything else, we'll go ahead and use reference libraries and the default page layout. So we'll go ahead and hit add. So that creates for us a quick template. I'm going to go ahead and delete the create new because we're not going to need that. This will be user orders. And then we may end up adding maybe something like a header up here, but we'll figure that out in a little bit. And let's go ahead and just run this and see how everything looks at first glance. Alright, so since I ran directly from the view, it tried to redirect me or direct me to the view, but there's no user ID defined, and it's not a nullable, so we ended up with an error. If I go question mark user ID equals 1, that should resolve that error. You can actually load the page, assuming there's no other runtime issues involved. Okay, so we have a page, but no data showed. So let me verify that we've got data from my user. So let's right click orders, show table data. And my user ID is 2, so that would explain why no data showed. So let's change that to a 2. And cross our fingers. Oh, looks like we have an exception. Object context instance has been disposed and can no longer be used for the operation. And that's because we're passing the order in here. So we're calling, I'm going to click references. Actually, let me stop. Click references, double click. That takes me back to that calling method. So the reason that we're having this issue is that we're not within the context, so we're not able to pull out the data that we need. So what we'll do instead is we need to do an include. So we'll say .include, or not there, sorry. So context.orders.include, and with the include we need to include the user property as an eager loading step. So what this basically is telling the entity framework is when you load orders, go ahead and load the user property also. Don't lazy load it. And then we'll still do the filtering, and then finally we'll say give us a list of those user orders. So that should correct the issue for us there. Alright, and that gives us our orders. So we can drop the user ID column, date created, we can move, we can do a lot of just cleanup on this in general. But we at least are getting back our rows. So that gives us the first part of what we're needing to do here. Now the second piece of this will be that we need to add a button to see the details or the products in a given order. So we'll have a button here, we'll replace these edit details delete with a view order details. So to do that, we'll jump into the index, not that index, jump into the order list by user index, cruise to the bottom here, and I'm just going to delete all of these but one, and I'll use that one as my refactor. So this will say order details, and this will then link into our controller calling the order items action, passing in the order ID. So we'll go ahead and say order items, and this will then be order ID to match the input parameter name. And that will then call our order details. So if we flip back here and refresh, now it says order details. Now it says order details. So if we click that, we'll just get an error right now because nothing's really been compiled or set. So let's jump back into our code and let's build out that action. So this action will be similar and fairly straightforward. What we'll need is we'll need a view model. So let's go ahead and do that work up front. So this will be order items view model. And inside of this, we're going to need to pull the details of order items and some of the product details. So we'll need property for the ID of the item, for the order itself. We'll want to know the product ID. We'll need the quantity. That date time for date created will be good. And we'll do date time for date modified. And then I need some product details as well. So we'll probably want to include a string for the name of the product. Oop, too many tabs. And then we'll probably want to include the unit price. And we'll get those from product. So in here we'll have a similar thing. We'll have a list of our order items view model. We'll bring in our using statement. We'll need our using statement for our DB context. And as I've stated before, you should be seeing a lot of similarities through these steps. Generally speaking, you're not going to see a whole lot of deviation, and the reason for that is that there are generally speaking best practices around how you go about getting your data and the types of steps you're doing. So hopefully you see those parallels and you should say to yourself, oh, okay, so we're just basically doing the same or similar steps as we did above. And the answer to that is yes. So we've got that piece, and then so that gets us our items. Oh, we need an orders, a list of order items. Now this is order item, that is the DTO, so this is order items DTO. And we'll store that here. And then we'll do convert to view model. And we'll say order items DTO dot select. And we'll say new order items view model, passing in that row, and then storing this inside of order items. Let's go ahead and clarify that and by saying VM for view model, and we'll refactor that with a rename, and then we'll return order items VM. Now the only piece that's missing here is that we don't have a constructor that takes in what we need, so we're going to generate that constructor. F12 to jump to that constructor, and in here we'll say basic mechanics again. We don't need that private ID equals row.id. Order ID equals row.order ID. Product ID equals row product ID. Quantity. So just copying these properties is the goal here. Now once we get into some of those secondary properties like loading up name and unit price, those are product name and product unit price. So let's go ahead and call this product name just for clarity. So we'll say product name equals row.product .name, and then unit price will be row.product.unit price. Alright, so we'll go ahead and jump back here. Oh, we have a cannot convert source type to target type because order items VM is a list. Oh, we forgot to call toList. .toList. So casting that result set to a list of order item view model. So F6. Alright, that seems to have worked. So now we just need to set up our view. So our view will return a list of those. So right click, add view. And this will be a list of these. Add. I'm going to do a little bit of quick cleanup. We're not going to use that create new. We're going to do it a different way. Change our header to say order items with a space. We don't need order ID and product ID listed. We'll probably want to start out with product name and unit price. The date created and date modified, yeah, we'll leave them there for now, but they're not necessary. So let's clean this up as well. Drop those. Move product name and unit price to the top. Quantity, alright. We'll go ahead and we don't need details, but we can keep the edit and delete and we'll use those in the future. So with those changes being made, let's go ahead and run our program again and see what happens. So if we refresh here, we're looking good. I just noticed that we're not logged in, but we're on manage orders. So let me jump back into that controller. And I'm going to add an authorize roles admin. Make sure only admins have access to this area. So now if I refresh, oh, now I got to build. And if I refresh again, I have to log in. No big deal. So admin management, oh, I didn't create an index there, so we'll have to do that later. So I want to look at my orders. My ID came across as 0. Interesting. So we've got a little bit of a bug we need to address. So we have item ID, which is our user. So if we jump back into user controller, index, we're populating a manage user view model, which we do not, well, we do have an ID property, but we're not populating that. So ID equals user DTO.ID. So that's the issue. That was kind of fast. So the issue was I did not have this line to populate my view model ID, so it was coming through in our code as a 0. So I'm correcting that by adding that property there. Alright, so that should take care of that issue. So let's do a quick build again. And refresh. Let me go back one screen and refresh. And then now if you look at the bottom of the screen, you can see the two, or I'll just click here. So now there's the order details for my user, or my orders for my user. And if I click user or order details for this particular order, now I can see the 4 items that I've ordered. Right, go back, order details, and there's the second order. So that's now starting to appear, and we've got those pieces set up. So now the next step in the process will be to go in and actually be able to add a product to this order and get those pieces in place.